Thank you very much indeed for a fascinating glimpse into the history of the energy community, and also, I think, in recalling the birth of this institution. You've given us a lot of insights into some of the issues facing us today. You left us with the idea that maybe the concept of energy union is an empty box. That's something maybe we'll turn to now to see if the rest of the panel agree with that, or are we being invited to think out of the box and come up with some new ideas? Derek mentioned that in 2015 the most important event is, of course, the 10th anniversary of the energy community, which means I think he'll be throwing a big party to which we're all invited, right? Good. Of course, there's a lot going on this year on the energy scene. There's the energy union discussion. There's the launch of the International Energy Charter, scheduled for May, I think is the kick-off political conference in The Hague. There's some fascinating developments going on in the old European Energy Charter Treaty, with Italy threatening to leave, I believe. That raises a lot of interesting questions. So 2015 is indeed, I think, going to be a great year for energy law. And we'll all be able to celebrate this at this famous birthday party when this occurs. So I'd like now to look into this box of the Energy Union and consider with two leading experts the state of the Energy Union. And I'd first like to invite Janez Kopač, who of course needs no introduction here, because to use the analogy that was just given by Dirk, it's actually your house. We're all invited into your house. So we're extremely grateful to be here for the third time. And the room is full again. So thank you very much for your hospitality, and I'd like to turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Leigh. So everybody, welcome once again in our house. I have to say, or I have to tell you that we stopped applications or closed applications 2 weeks ago because there were too many applicants. We stopped this on 125 because the room is too small. Otherwise, perhaps there would be double as much. And perhaps next year we will have to think to move in a bigger place. So, very briefly, something about energy union. I mean, anti-energy community. Mr. Schmidt von Sydow was very extensive already, and perhaps I will, and he helped me to to overcome this presentation faster. Energy union. I will not repeat all the history. I call it okay, somebody says battle, empty box. I say I named this battle of pillars. Donald Tusk, 6 pillars. The most important one. This is real, the real leverage, or the real reason for starting talking about energy union is joint negotiations of energy contracts with Russia. So this was the key pillar of all these debates in latest time, not 10 years ago and earlier, but now. And because everything else we already somehow have, or is possible to do it with slight improvements and fine-tuning inside European Union. So there were 6 pillars, one of them energy community. We were happy to see us. Then Mr. Šefčovič came, and now this is the official proposal of European Commission. There are 5 pillars. One of them is energy security, solidarity, trust. This is the first one, and energy community is mentioned slightly there. It was not in the first drafts of the text, but then Dirk and I lobbied all around Strasbourg and Brussels, like selling hot stuff. And we succeeded in amending the initial drafts in the way that energy community is there mentioned as well. it's important to be there. Not the size of the text is perhaps less important, because this is a paper which will, of course, change in the future as well. And now we will build on this paragraph which talks about energy community. Then there is Professor Andoura and Mr. Vinois with 3 areas, 10 building blocks. I can't call them pillars, but okay. There is some similarity with pillars. Then Professor Buzek. I mean, there are several other ideas as well. I didn't list all of them. There is Professor Buzek with high-level reflection group, which proposed changes or amendments to the treaty. And I wrote there Energy Community Secretariat. Mr. Schmidt von Sydow said Kopač Bushle. With 1 pillar. So energy union is energy community. And this is an academic debate, which of course will be also very interesting in the future. So energy community is this map. I believe everybody knows it, with European Union as one party. And it's the only international institution where EU is talking with one voice. And Schmidt von Sydow just explained how it happened. And of course this makes us, let's say, more stable and more predictable. Our legal framework is not very rich one. Now there are approximately, I don't know, between 10 and 15 directives and regulations. This covers different areas, and we already started to spill over. So it's not only energy. There are 5 environmental directives, which are environment is mentioned already in the original treaty. But now, for example, there is an idea in this year's work program to transpose also directive on marine fuels, which is purely a transportation one. And there are some other ideas as well. There is even, it's an interesting idea, because this transport community in southeastern Europe is now being discussed for decade already, and without any final step or without any visible success. There are some ideas already that energy community should take over the process and transpose also transportation acquis into this would not be only for southeastern Europe, it would be also for Moldova and Ukraine, because they are ours as well. But this would be one of the possible steps how to use this flexibility, which was earlier mentioned by Mr. Schmidt von Sydow. He already explained how our institutions are. So idea was to copy-paste as much as possible EU, but this judicial function is not very successful one and needs some improvements. Also again, Mr. Helmut Schmidt von Sydow mentioned different articles of our treaty which could be building blocks for the energy union. So it's Article 42, which enables also to contracting parties, let's say Ukraine, Serbia, whoever, to propose new acquis, which would then be valid for not only energy community contracting parties, but also for EU. So it represents a really true partnership organization with a pan-European vision. So it is EU plus something, and it is institutionally well settled. Then we have Article 43, which already now envisages single barrier mechanism. This is something what was the main idea of Donald Tusk when he started to talk about energy union. but this idea was heavily criticized in some EU member states, and I believe it was also killed. But something remained also in the paper for the energy union. The Commission should be involved in overview of gas contracts, mostly gas contracts, could be all energy contracts with third parties. But energy community has a clear treaty provision for single buyer mechanism. So it can be used, or it could be used for the same purpose. Then we have solidarity clause, which was already earlier explained, never triggered, but I have to tell you that this year, not long ago, 3 weeks ago, Ukraine announced it could trigger it this year. So we will see how this will work in practical life, but things are becoming interesting. And then there is this Article 100, which already earlier explained, allows extension of the key to other essential infrastructure networks. I already mentioned transport a key. So these were original contracting parties. These are nowadays contracting parties. You can see the, and now Georgia is becoming, which is not colored. And this, of course, changed the character of institution completely, and our life was prolonged. So from initial 10 years now to 20 years, but such provisional solutions are usually most long-lasting. So I believe that also in 20, 30 years, energy community will vitally exist. And this is why it is necessary to discuss now how to adapt it for its future tasks. Originally, when it was for Southeastern Europe, was kind of a waiting room for EU, but with further extension, I believe will become, at least for some contracting parties, a permanent mechanism of cooperation with EU without being full-fledged member anytime. So this is its benefit, because EU in this battle of empires, nowadays battles of empires, will have to react similarly, otherwise it will just lose its periphery, because already now are coming Russia, are coming China is coming. Everybody is taking a piece out of the periphery, and if this will not be these relations will not be intensified. This will be also the end of EU, because empires are never defended in the center, but always on the periphery. And this is something what EU will have to learn. So we launched discussion on the energy community for the future. Last year in June, high-level reflection group published its report, and this report has many interesting ideas. I will not present all of them. Perhaps only it was chaired by Professor Buzek. Perhaps for today's discussion, there is one very interesting idea. It's an idea related to geographical scope, and this idea suggests that we should declare interest in specific strategically important countries or regions, and there are mentioned Eastern Partnership countries, so it means Armenia, Belarus, and Azerbaijan as not being members yet. Georgia is somehow already in the family, and Switzerland, Norway, and Mediterranean countries. So these are, let's say, final EU or European borders related to energy issues, of course. And idea was or is that we should introduce so-called two-tier membership. So core members, which are existing contracting parties, these yellow-colored countries earlier, and associated members, which would have a possibility to opt in to implement additional acquis and improved enforcement and easier access to financing. So to have not only core members but also associated members, which, if I try to illustrate this, would perhaps not transpose and implement third energy package, but perhaps only second energy package, and perhaps not in gas and electricity sector, but only in electricity sector. I mean, it's of course open to the discussion. But so this would represent a new map, which would be, as I said, would touch the final borders of pan-European space. Okay, I forgot to color Azerbaijan there, but this is an idea of so-called associated memberships or two-tier membership. And now we just finished the public consultation about that paper, about proposals from the high-level reflection group. I think we will publish press release about it and the summary of public consultation today or perhaps tomorrow. Barbara, today? Yeah, okay. And I have to tell you that this idea of associated membership was not very supported in the public consultation. Especially governments that participated in the public consultation are more keen to have very clear trace, you know, you are in or you are out, so no flexibility. I think this is not a good approach, because we have to invent a mechanism how to bring the periphery more in. For example, the discussion about energy union, I believe, is a perfect opportunity to overcome all the barriers in relations between EU and Turkey. This would be a perfect opportunity to invent a third forum, so not being member, not being non-member, but to invent something third to overcome all the obstacles which exist in existing relations. But there is nothing like this in paper on energy union. And flexibility which energy community offers is not used enough. Is this the end of the history? It's not. EU started with integration in energy field and will, I believe, I put there also a question mark, but I believe will also finish there. It was the beginning of the process, and I believe will be the end of the process as well. But this process is, you know, measured in decades. Already Mr. Schmidt von Sydow mentioned all the ideas about different unions: economic union, monetary union, banking union, union of democratic change, union for Mediterranean, which was also an invention how to bring somebody in but not completely in, and how to leave it more out. What is important, when this paper was first discussed in Riga on Ministerial Council a month ago, Vice President of the Commission, Mr. Šefčovič, somehow launched so-called Riga process. This, I believe, will be a process, another one, which will deal or which will discuss this paper on energy union further, because I believe this half-empty box or this battlefield of pillars is not finished yet, and of course such processes take their time, and I believe that we will deal with the paper on our definition on energy union also in a year time, in 2 year time. The mandate of Commission and also of Vice President for energy union is 5 years, so there will be a lot of discussion, I believe, on energy union and its definition in the future. And see you in next union, our next debate about the union, and of course, hopefully see you in a 1 year time in our premises or somewhere close as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we'll turn immediately now to Sami Andoura, and then we'll start the discussion after that. So I think we're welcoming Sami for the first time here. And Sami is a professor at the College of Europe in Bruges, and also a member of Jacques Delors' think tank in Paris, and has worked on the topic of energy union for some years, and has, you've already seen his name on the last presentation, has recently published a study on the matter. So he will now give us his vision on an energy union. Thank you, Sami.
Thank you very much, Leigh. Thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very pleased to be here to discuss this topical issue of energy union. No, I understand why your sheet were falling always. Okay. I've heard a lot of things. I'm supposed to speak now. I'm supposed to finish my speech just right now. And I think it's important that we have a very good discussion. We are numerous experts here, and Energy Union is opening a lot of opportunities, also a lot of challenges, and I'm sure that you want to discuss, raise questions, etc. So I will try to be as short as possible, but still, the problem is that beyond what I plan to say, I've heard so many things that I could take just the time to discuss what I've heard, but I will leave it to the debate. But what was inspiring is the history of the Energy Community Treaty, 10 years, etc. It was very inspiring to hear how you get there, and a bit less inspiring about the recent history. I think there are some confusion, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But history is very important, and especially in the field of energy, because if you look at European energy policy, it's a very recent, a very young policy. The European Union started energy with two treaties, but then, for long, nothing happened. And you can even say that an energy policy started in 2005, 2007, with this energy and climate package. And before that, it was an internal market policy, flanked with some environmental measures and some competition instruments. And that's it. So we have to be prudent, and we have to be cautious in not criticizing too much what has happened. It's very recent, it's very young, so of course many things have been able to develop, and this always, as you mentioned, was pushed by crisis. And again, so we feel a bit addicted to crisis in the European Union. We have plenty of those crises in-house and outside, so the Energy Union will have a lot of things to deal with crisis, of course. But this new policy immediately faced adverse developments, both coming from outside markets and also from inside regulation, the way it was developed and the way it was also implemented by the countries, by the stakeholders, etc., etc. So immediately we launch something big, and immediately we realize that we need to adapt to cope with crisis and to revise what was quite new. Most of the shortcomings are today well identified. Most of them. The question is, how do we address these shortcomings? But also launching long-term vision, long-term project about the energy transition. So this is a key task, and this is the objective of this energy union, to address this. And this comes in a very difficult context. As we've seen, the current context in the European Union, and especially in the field of energy, is one of fragmentation of regulation. With Leigh, we even called it pixelization. Fragmentation of initiatives, fragmentation of markets, fragmentation of countries, of stakeholders, etc. And this is operating in a field where you have also huge silo mentalities. You can look at all conferences, at the Riga conference on the Energy Union, at other previous conferences. You know, you have the nuclear against gas, against the renewables, etc., the TSO, the DSO, etc., etc., etc. So it's a huge silo mentalities. It's very difficult to get all these actors moving into the same direction. And also it's a context of, unfortunately, we talked about empty box, thinking out of the box, etc., about a lack of innovative ideas. This is not an academic debate per se, but what is sure is that academics have a role to play to bring innovative ideas. And for this, we have here key figures with Leigh, with Jean-Michel, with others, the Florence School, and even the Secretariat, to bring these new ideas, policy-oriented ideas, and not only academic. So now let's talk about this energy union beyond this current context. I will bring some additional confusion to the confusion. We have now a new report. So I'm mentioned as College of Europe. I'm professor. There is a European Energy Policy Chair at the College of Europe. But also I'm research fellow at the Jacques Delors Institute for several years now. And we have just developed a new proposal endorsed by Jacques Delors himself, from the European Energy Community to the Energy Union, a policy proposal for the short and the long term. There's plenty of things into this proposal. I invite you to read it. I will not comment into details. But I'm very happy to be here today. Why did we call it? Because we started in 2010. And Leigh played a role in that, a key role, Jean-Michel as well. We started with this idea of energy community. It was not a confusion. We knew that there was a Energy Community Treaty for Southeastern Europe, for Southeastern Europe. Community was because Jacques Delors has this idea that energy was the next frontier for the European Union, with others. At the time, we identified a menu of measures that should be developed at the field of energy. And then, for you legal experts, I invite you to look at this 2010 report. We look at all legal instruments that could be used to implement this set of measures, from the current treaties, from enhanced cooperation, Article 20, from Schengenization, you create outside the institutional structures with some countries to move ahead on certain issues, but we rapidly saw that it was impossible to get this core group of countries agreeing on all aspects of energy policy, moving ahead, leaving those behind, etc. So it's a pixelization, it's a lot of different groups, which in fact is what regionalization. And we even identified a new treaty. And at the time, of course, 2010, it was not the flavor of the day, it was not the good idea, the right idea, the treaty. But still, if you look at the assessment which was made, and if you look at the measures that we proposed, it was already key, and it's still key today. So energy union is not about reinventing everything. There's a lot of things that were already there. Energy union is just the time to push these issues real, concrete, and make them operational. So then came, of course, Donald Tusk, Poland. And what it shows is that you can have a nice European concept if it's not operational, real. It can be instrumentalized by all interests. And it's normal that Poland promoting energy union is defending a Polish view. There is nothing special for that. And then it's normal that the industry, when it's defending its own energy union, it's, of course, defending its own position. But what is interesting, and I invite you to read it, is the Juncker, because you mentioned that they didn't know. I think they really knew what they were doing. And if you want to have a sense of where they want to bring this energy union really, look at the Juncker program for the European Commission and the political guidelines. You will have a vision which is quite ambitious, quite bold, audacious, and this is where they want to bring it. But then, even if you launch big ideas, we are ambitious, etc., you directly see that putting all the society, the economy, economic, industrial forces, etc., together, aligning them along this objective is then something completely different. And if you start with pillars, dimensions, etc., of course you open the box of the shopping list. We want this, we want that, we want this, we want that, etc. So what is sure is that it created huge expectations outside of the European Commission. It is not anymore debated around the Polish 6 pillars, etc., it is now debated from the proposal of the European Commission. Then, like it or not, you can, of course, criticize, etc., this proposal for good reasons, but this is the basis. So we find a lot of things in this package. Some say that too much things, but what is necessary is to articulate at the European Union level all issues related to energy together. The old method, you know, we have a security problem, we will develop a security strategy. We have a problem of sustainable development, let's develop a low carbon strategy. We need competitiveness, let's develop a competitive strategy. This is fragmented, this is in silo. There is always a need now to have a combined and interactive way to address all these issues together. That's what we need, such a kind of thing. So what is the Energy Union, concretely? First, it is a narrative. And if you look at the two first pages, it tells a story. It brings first a sober assessment of the external context, the outside world, globalization, economy, access to raw materials, security of supply, etc., innovation. And the role of and the status of the European Union in this context is one of declining. So if you look at this from a sober assessment, you rapidly see that the Energy Union is even not a matter of ambition, it's a matter of necessity. The second thing is that then comes these big principles, which are relevant. Security, solidarity, and trust. Optimization of energy resources, networks, and so on. How do you ensure the complementarity between national energy systems, markets, resources, networks, without going for a European energy mix or things like that, in a sustainable way? All this imply one project, one process, and I quote, a shift from a centralized supply-side approach towards demand side and the involvement of the consumer at the heart of the system, and move away from a fragmented system characterized by uncoordinated national policies, market barriers, and energy-isolated areas. This is the Energy Union, this is the goal, this is the aim. So how do we go there? Then comes and starts the most difficult part of the process, and we are here now. What does it imply? What is sure is that no tabula rasa, we will not reinvent the wheel. No silver bullet which will address all the issues, so no new treaty, no new institution. And what we suggest here in this report, and what you find in this package but not properly articulated, but you see that there are things dealing with the current order, revising the energy policy, addressing the past and current shortcomings, but also at the same time trying to bring a new project, a new vision for the future. And this is a two-track approach. If you really want to have an added value, which is not just repackaging the energy policy into an energy union, you need this. But for this, and we have identified, but I will, and I really invite to look at them. Unfortunately, it's a 162 pages report, but that means that you have good food for thought. But if you look at all this, first, we do not have it. Second, we need it. And third, it implies a dramatic change in the way that we operate, we think, we develop, we implement energy systems in Europe. Just take one, an industrial energy strategy driven by innovation. When we call what we call innovation in Europe, it's 80% of the funds which are invested in deploying mature technologies into the system. This is not innovation, it's learning curves by an industrial policy. And these 80% are fragmented at national level and within countries between public and private funds, and even private funds are then fragmented between different economic sectors, etc. So we need something like that. We need to invest in education on the challenges and behaviors around the energy transition if we really want this transition to occur. We call it the social energy policy. You know, energy poverty, and you can go to Serbia, etc. There's a lot of people dying from hypothermia, etc. It's much more than the issue of tariffs of electricity, of prices, regulated prices, etc. It's a social issue, which implies a social policy. This goes much beyond the way that this has been addressed for years into the field of energy so far. So you have a lot of things like this, an energy trade policy for the defense and promotion of the EU sustainable economic interest outside the EU. We have the impression that this would be a revolution because this issue of competence, national sovereignty over the mix, the supply of the structure of the supply, etc. But trade policy are used in all other sectors of European economy and not in the field of energy. Why? It's a nonsense. It's because a basic fragmentation, artificial between inside and external dimension, etc., etc. So there's a lot of things to be done, which will bring a European Energy and Climate Information Agency. When the Americans come, when the Russians come, when the Chinese come in Brussels to discuss energy deals or dialogues or whatever, or the international agency, let's take just that one, they know much better than Europeans the state of their markets, the evolution of their energy system, the global picture. Why? Because at European level there is no such institution or agency or body or whatever, a common platform for common analysis, understanding, modeling, etc., etc. So how do you want to compete in this context? You cannot. So this is the long-term project of the Energy Union. And you find a lot of these things in this paper. It can look abstract, of course. In 2 lines, it's difficult to be very precise about something, but at least it gives you a direction. Then it's up to the lawyers, of course, to be innovative in the way that this can be implemented, developed, and made operational. But for this to occur, it is essential to revise and address the shortcomings of current energy policy. And this is a list of immediate actions. We call them technical actions. Technical because it's not, again, a matter of political ambition. It could be seen as that, but no. It's a matter of something technical that needs to be addressed, both regarding the internal market, both regarding the increased empowerment of the stakeholders themselves, regarding the external dimension of this internal market, the Energy Community Treaty, the IGAs, this question of leveraging the internal market in international negotiation. All this might raise a lot of legal issues. And finally, regarding, of course, the governance, the transparency, the monitoring, the consolidation, etc. And all this goes much beyond the 20 and 30 energy and climate package. It's part of the European energy policy, but it's not only that. So to conclude, what is clear is some other things are new, other are, let's call them a post hoc rationalization of some good existing practices, and some are just old ideas which never came to the light and that we need to bring back into the discussion and make them happen this time in 2015. And for that, I will finish by a motto of Jacques Delors, which is quite relevant. You mentioned the single market package. What was the principles at the heart of the single market package, which are quite relevant for the European energy sector? It's the competition that stimulates, the cooperation, not coordination, the cooperation that strengthens, and clearly the missing link today is cooperation. You can adopt all regulation, legislation, directives, etc. If it's always implemented at national level, it doesn't change the whole picture. And finally, it's solidarity that unites, solidarity between countries, between operators, but also between just people of Europe. So all this implies a strong involvement of the stakeholders, not only the member states, but regulators, DSO, TSO, utilities, innovators, investors, consumers, and civil society at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sami, for, I think, I have to say, a very eloquent and passionate presentation of your ideas on the necessity of the energy union. Now, you quite rightly said there should be a lot of discussion, and you've very kindly made sure that we have time for it. So can I invite the first question from the audience? Somebody dare to kick off? Everybody has to chew things over. Dirk.
Only really doing that to break the ice. If there's somebody else, do it now. 'Cause I will talk for a long time. He will also talk for a long time.
My name is Günther Bramböck from EVN, one of the sponsors of the event. My main question is, and I'm working together with the energy community now for several years, and what very often raised was the question how to deal with the old open questions, and now we get new ones. We have old conflicts of goals, and with, I think, although I'm pro-solidarity, but it's another question how to combine solidarity with competition. And several similar such questions, and this is what I'm not getting clear, and I think it creates more confusion even, and the orientation should be found first. And I think two other short comments. I think it's not just a legal question, it's a combination of technical, economic and legal interests which should be combined. And concerning the innovation, I think it's nowadays more an organizational question in innovation than in technical. That means how to bring the technical possibilities to the market and to function. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Solidarity and competition, how can it work together and with cooperation? I give you first an example where the European Union was able to really bring those together and how this should inspire other sectors. Look at gas. We had several crises. And first, the EU thought that it was not something related to the EU at all. It was between Russia and Ukraine, nothing to do with that. And then they rapidly realized that a lot of issues were in fact coming within the EU. And it ended with a disruption, some countries directly affected. And what we realized is that the gas was there, but the gas could not go from one country to the other. Why that? You can say for technical reasons, the pipelines were not made with reverse flow. You can say also because it was aimed that national markets would be fragmented with different deals from one country to the other. This is something we can discuss, but still. How can solidarity play whether your technical infrastructure cannot help you to, even if you would decide to help your neighboring country, you cannot. Let's be a bit more precise. Who is helping who? Is it Germany who's calling Poland, Angela Merkel, the Kaczynski brothers at that time? Or is it in fact the companies themselves who also discuss the TSOs, etc.? So we have private economic operators. What do they want to do even in times of crisis? Economic profit. That's the way that the economy is structured. So you need a system which allows these economic operators to make economic profits, but in a spirit of solidarity. How do you do that? The EU has adopted a regulation in 2010, which is not, because you know when we say regulation, it's not re-regulating the whole sector at all. It is just putting the right system into place with a certain harmonization of the conditions related to who's responsible for what, etc., in the field of security of supply for gas, member states, regulators, TSOs, and private companies. And then it opens the way for further cooperation. cooperation between the countries, emergency plans that they might do together at regional level, etc. And based on this principle of solidarity, which opens cooperation, you have competition because companies will be able to sell some gas to the neighboring countries, etc., even in times of crisis. So this can work. It's the only example. That's why I mentioned, of course, energy union is a holistic approach, multidisciplinary, economy, law, political, international relations, etc., etc. But what is sure is that you cannot make the system work only with communication, strategies, ad hoc groups. You know, when we have a new issue, we create a new forum or a new process in the European Union. No, we need also regulation. So, and the one field which is critical, it's security of the electricity system, electricity supply. What do we have? Nothing. We have a directive of 2004, which is a very broad framework directive, just saying to the countries that they should take care of it. That's it. Can it work? No. What do we need? A regulation. A regulation, not exactly as the one of gas, because security of electricity is much different. It's in fact the whole system. But we need that. And in the Energy Union package, it's called for a legislation. This is a breakthrough. You can say, well, come on, okay. No, it's a breakthrough. So now the question will be, how do you implement, make this real? And how do you link it with market design, also calling for a legislation? Is it different from security of electricity supply? It's not clear. So this is an answer to that concern. And just regarding innovation, I totally agree. But it's not a matter of, again, reinventing the new technologies. A lot of these technologies are there. It's a matter of organizing the economy to bring these technologies into the system. What are they? It's digital energy. Do we have it? The technologies? Yes. Do we have it in the electricity system? No.
Thanks. Only some words about solidarity. I don't have a clear vision on how to answer on this transfer of technology. European Union and also energy community in the past always somehow more or less successful mixed solidarity approach with market approach. One example was mentioned by Professor Sami Andoura. These are projects of common interest. There is money in European budget for them, and without them there is no real opportunity for market to solve security of supply problems. We always say market has to be first, but sometimes you need pipeline, reverse flow and such things as well, and there will be public money which will help solving this problem. This is one of the forms of solidarity. Another form which was invented in third energy package is called public service obligation. There is no clear definition what the public service obligation is, but some countries are using, some EU countries are using this in a different way. One of them, for example, Lithuania, with consent of or with agreement of the Commission, used this concept in the way that they obliged every single market participant or trader, supplier of gas to buy part of the gas in LNG, which is of course much more expensive than existing natural gas from Russia for next 10 years or something like this, because of course they want to overcome the status of being too dependent on one supplier. And this is against market, but brings, okay, because of stability of supply, on the long run brings some solidarity as well, as I see it such. For example, a next interesting experiment will be Ukraine, where IMF imposed a transitional period to come from existing really non-market situation in gas sector to market environment in gas sector from now till April 2017, and all this transitional period will have to be defined by public service obligation secondary legislation. This will be a challenging new experiment, also very educative for EU, but it will be done outside EU. And the third aspect about mixture of solidarity and market approach, which I want to mention, is our socially vulnerable customers, also part of third energy package. This is not very defined in EU as well. Here in energy community we are more advanced than in EU. We even adopted common energy community definition on socially vulnerable customers, who can be part of the group of socially vulnerable customers. This is only a recommendation, it's not obligatory. But we have it. EU cannot reach one single definition. But it's important to define socially vulnerable customers. They are not defined in all EU member states yet, and also not in all energy community contracting parties yet. Having in mind that this is market, from there on is solidarity, of course, which is paid by public money, not by participation of other market participants. So I think in general, in theory is done, but implementation is a little bit delayed. Thanks.
Very quickly, very quickly.
Vulnerable consumer, it's already tough to identify them, but today it's vulnerable passive consumers. So the question is, what will be vulnerable active consumers?
You mean when we have efficient demand response in that context? Do we have any other questions? Lots.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Could you please say who you are?
Oh yes, Filipe Santos from the Energy Regulator of Portugal. Okay, ERS, which is Energy Regulator of Portugal. My question is about this, of course, the energy union, because as far as I'm concerned, when we talk about monetary union, we have single instruments and single institutions, the central bank. When we today write or talk about banking union, we are talking about single resolution scheme and the compensatory mechanism for the investors, a single one too. And what I'm seeing here, it's a cocktail of actions, okay, to enhance cooperation. But in fact, I'm not, as far as I understand, I'm not seeing the single mechanism yet. So is this name union, energy union, going to be only a name for enhancing cooperation and to align policies, EU policies, or is more than that? I hope it is more than that. And as far as I'm concerned, maybe I'm wrong, but community of energy community, it's a question of dimension. More countries where is applied the European law and a mechanism for extra cooperation. I believe that energy union should go not widely but deeper, and to enhance and create single policy, a single market and a single policy for electricity and gas. I would like to hear you about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think what I'll do is collect a few questions, because we're really actually in the coffee break and about to start the next session. So I saw one hand, two hands. Christoph, you had a question? Oh, she's going to go.
Christoph Riechmann from Frontier Economics. I have a remark and a question, probably to Sami. Janez, on one of your slides, we saw a single buyer as a possible solution for energy security of supply. I suppose we mainly speak about gas here. I'm actually slightly suspicious whether that is a good solution, partly because a single buyer may lack a bit of dynamics. and possibly also the history tells us wrong, because a lot of the gas contracts that we have today, they actually still derive from the world of national single buyers. So I was wondering to what extent in your concept, Sami, the single buyer is also an integral part, or what do you think about the single buyer idea?
And then a question over there.
Hello everyone, Jerzy Dudek, European University Institute, Florence. Very brief question about the vision of the European Energy Union. Actually, all of you kind of concluded that's an empty toolbox, but still kind of.
Not at all.
Okay, you didn't.
It's a
So-
heavy box.
Okay, for you it's a heavy box. So then, just to answer somehow, or push it a bit more, this discussion, it's a strategic document, obviously, so we have a vision. So the question is more whether the emphasis changed, whether we have different directions on the horizon. And I will be very happy to hear about that, especially if you consider this change regarding energy security. Of course, it was there in the beginning, but somehow now it's very high on the agenda. Obviously, the geopolitical change influenced that, the Polish proposal as well. But yeah, how would you see whether we have changed kind of the trend in EU energy policy here? Thank you.
Okay, I think we that's all the questions that we can. Oh, there's one at the very back,
Yeah.
and then.
My name is Vitaly Rashchenko. I'm from CMS Camera Mechanic Kiev, and my question is probably to Janez. The dispute resolution mechanism under the Energy Community Treaty. There are some people say that it's too soft. Is there any intention to strengthen it, make it more demanding on the states, and whether that would be reflected in the further amendments, or would it find its way into EU energy union type of treaty? Thank you.
Thanks. Well, maybe you would like to start with the question directed to you. It's also something we'll come back to in a later session, but you have a microphone there.
Thanks. Very briefly, of course, we proposed under the umbrella of this high-level reflection group, or Professor Buzek's report, several options. One was establishing the Court of Energy Community, as initial idea was 10 years ago. The other one was to strengthen existing dispute settlement procedure, which is now not very logic mixture of legal process and political process, because on the end, Ministerial Council has to condemn one of contracting parties to for breaching the treaty, and of course ministers are politicians. They are somehow show some extent of solidarity to other colleagues. They're not judges, So this doesn't function very well. You're right. I mean, till this last stage, it functions very well, and it was successful always in the past. But really, this last stage doesn't function very well. So there are several proposals how to amend it. I will not now go into detail. And this year we will discuss about that, and this year Ministerial Council will adopt a solution which will change this procedure a little bit, because I believe also in this public consultation which we had, this court was widely supported mostly by NGOs, but not by EU member states. So I believe this idea is somehow killed already. But we will see. So there is a lot of discussion about it. And very shortly about, I think, two other questions. So there is a big debate what energy union is. Some people are talking about processes inside European Union. Some people are talking about processes in neighborhood, or at least wider than European Union. My deep belief is that European Union cannot exist without taking into account also at least periphery of EU. It means this broader dimension. You can't imagine security of supply without Ukraine. You can't imagine competition without network codes in neighboring countries. You can't imagine sustainability without exporting 2020 package to countries which represent integral part of internal energy market as well. So this doesn't function. I mean, you can't have two regimes in one internal energy market. What is case now? So energy union has to be an answer to that questions as well. But very many EU politicians and very many EU energy stakeholders concentrated only on internal issues when talking about energy union, having it as a trademark. You know, it's another a political slogan, I would say, about unifying the European energy policy. That's good, it's okay, it's needed, but it has to be also pan-European.
Yeah, very short. Of course, energy union, it's a European project, which needs to deepen the European construction in the field of energy. But of course, it cannot be, for all the reasons you mentioned, be disconnected from the outside world. But of course, let's not move now for a pan-European energy union. But energy union, but let's not be inward looking. Why don't we have an energy union as a banking union with one institution, etc.? Why that? Because it reflects the fragmentation of the energy sector and the energy system at national, industrial, economic level. That's the main reason. What do we suggest and what do you find in this package? Strengthening the European regulator, making it a real regulator, not just an agency for the coordination, cooperation of regulators. This is different. Strengthening the TSO. You could even think about regional TSO. So there are things that can move you into this direction, but let's not be naive and believe that energy union like this will bring you the unique institution, the unique treaty, the unique energy mix, and blah, blah, blah.
No silver bullet.
No silver bullet. And finally, it's interesting regarding the gas single buyer, etc. No, last point, it's a strategic framework, but it's not an empty box. Why? Because beyond the text, at the end, you find, then you can criticize, of course, the relevance of the proposals, etc. But you find 15 action plans, action points. So this is something real, concrete, with a planning, with an agenda, etc. Of course, it's going to move, but it's 2015, 2016. So for me, no empty box. Single buyer. We proposed it in 2010 with Jerzy Buzek and Jacques Delors. We were named heretic. You know, wow, it's against the market, it's against competition law, it's against the rules. Now we are discussing it, it's very sexy, topical, wow, single buyer, this is the silver bullet of the energy union. It was much more necessary in 2010 than it is today. Why? Because the supply scene for gas was much more fragmented vis-à-vis the EU than it is today. LNG occurred. And now there is much more diversification, much more suppliers. So we still believe that this is something, but it's really a tiny part of the solution. It's voluntary, allowing those, and I will finally, because I see my colleague from Norway who's there, between this fragmentation, internal and external market. For me, I find it striking that the European Union is dependent, an import dependency over Norway. Norway should be part of the European internal market. You are. So why are we dependent for your gas? That's a question.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we've had a fascinating session this morning. I'm afraid we've run over it a little bit, but we have, I hope, the possibility throughout the day of picking up a bit of time. I'll leave you with a thought that I entertained back in 2010 when we were working together, Sami and I, together with Mark van der Wouder on the report on the Energy Union. And Mark van der Wouder, who's now a judge at the court, was very keen on a lot of centralised solutions. So I renamed him Napoleon, for which he has never really forgiven me. But it's, to me, and I think that's something we'll come back to. Why do we need such a centralized approach? And I can ask this question because I'm going to stop the session and Sami can't answer me. But I think to me, if we're having a low carbon economy in the future, the transition is to decentralization, enormous decentralization. And I struggle still to see why we need so much centralization to get to decentralization. That to me is an interesting legal as well as economic issue.
Can I say one word?
No.
It's important because I wrote this report with someone, and I did not mention his name, is Jean-Arnold Vinois, who's a key expert, and we wrote this report together. He's not with us today, but you will hear about him in the future, Jean-Arnold Vinois. And no centralization, no centralization.